Today we're going to work on the product rule. So this is a new rule for us, and in order to explain it, I've written this little slide. So let's go through this slide and see what is here for us. So first off, I'm going to tell you that f is a function and g is also a function. So these are both functions, and they're both functions of x. So if I tell you to take the derivative with respect to x of the product of f times g, what we would do is we would first take the function f and just write it down, and then we would take the derivative of the function of g, and then we would add, and this is important, we would add the function of g, so we'll make that red, just the plain old function of g times the derivative of the function of f. Okay, so the way you're going to remember this is that the derivative of a product equals left, whatever function's on the left, and in this case it's your f function, times the derivative of the function on the right, and the function on the right is your g function, plus right, whichever function's on the right, and that's your g, times the derivative of the function on the left. So that's the rule. I want you to write that down so that you have it on top of your notes. And then we're going to do some examples. Okay, so I've set up example 1 here for us. It's a very simple example, but it will serve as a good initial practice of the product rule. So our f of x is 7x squared, our g of x is 2x, and we want to take the derivative with respect to x of f times g. So the rule is left d right plus right d left, and I've written that for us right here. Alright, so we're going to define h of x as that product, f of x times g of x. So therefore, h prime of x will be left. So looking up at left, I have 7x squared d right, and that's going to be times 2, plus right, and that's going to be our 2x, d left, and that'll be 14x. So let's clean this up a little bit. 2 times 7 is 14. That first product is 14x squared, plus 2x times 14x is 28x squared. And if I add them all together, because they have the same x squared, I'm going to end up with 42x squared. So h prime of x equals 42x squared, and that's our first example of the product rule. Alright, so here comes example 2. Now I have it all written out for us. So example 2 says, if my first function f of x is x squared, so we're right here, and my second function g of x is 7x plus 4 squared, then when I want to define h of x as f of x times g of x, I can write it out like this. Okay, so the easiest thing here is to do the product rule. So here's our product rule setup. So next step, we're h prime of x. What does that equal? Well, remember, it equals left, here's our left function, d right, here's the derivative of our right function, taking into account the power rule and the chain rule. So look at that carefully and make sure you understand what I did. Plus right, so here's just the plain old g of x function, times the derivative of the left, and that's 2x. Okay, so let's combine some things here. We have a 7, a 2, so here's 7, a 2, and an x squared. So that becomes 14x squared times the 7x plus 4 that was in parentheses. Plus, bring the 2x in front, so I have 2x, 7x plus 4 squared. Okay, next. This is fine for amateurs, but as we get more proficient at this, I'm expecting that you will take it to this step. You will need to do this. So look what I've done. I have said, given these two terms, what do they have in common? So I'm factoring by grouping. I want to get a product for my final answer. And so what they have in common is a 2x and a 7x plus 4. Then give yourself your box. In order to get this first term back, so I want to get this entire first term back, I need to multiply my 2x times 7x plus 4 times a 7x. Make sure you get that piece before we move on. Then bring down this operation, and in order to get this blue box back, I'm going to need to multiply by 7x plus 4 because I already have the 2x and one of the 7x plus 4s. Alright, so that's good, but we can combine what is in my box, my black box right here. Let's combine these and we'll get 14x plus 4. So now I have my final answer is that h prime of x equals 2x, parentheses, 7x plus 4, parentheses, 14x plus 4, done. So that's example 2 of the product rule. Okay, let's start out very basic, and a function a is defined as being the product of sine x times cosine x. Let me just put a little parentheses here to separate the angles. So I now want a prime. So I see I have a product, so I know by my product rule that I'm going to say left d right, and the derivative of cosine x is negative sine x, plus right d left, and the derivative of sine x is cosine x. So let's clean this up, and I see I have sine x times a negative sine x gives me negative sine squared x, and then cosine x times cosine x gives me cosine squared x, and there we go. Now, we didn't incorporate any chain rule with angles, and we didn't have any powers up here initially, so it was a very basic example. Make sure you can do the basic, because now we're going to go to the next level with a little bit more complicated example in example 4. Okay, so here's example number 4, and for example 4 we have sine 7x times cosine 5x squared. So we have changed our angle to be something other than just plain old x, so I know that I'm introducing the chain rule. So to get our product, should I say to get our product's derivative, we're going to say left, just sine 7x, d right. Now the derivative of the right is going to be negative sine, remember keep your angle, and then times the derivative of your angle, which will be 10x. Okay, and then we have plus, so far we've done left d right plus right, and on our right is cosine 5x squared d left. So d left is going to be cosine 7x times 7. Alright, we have a little cleanup to do, so let's see what we can do here. I'm thinking we're going to pull the 10x in the front. Because we have a negative sign, I'm going to make that negative, and then I have sine 7x times sine 5x squared. So I cannot combine them since they have different angles. Then plus, I bring my 7 up front, and let's go cosine 7x times cosine 5x squared, and that would be how I would combine them. If I wanted to make this a product, what I would do is I'd say what do they have in common, and do they have anything in common. So I say I have a sine 7x, a sine 5x squared, and I have a 7 and a negative 10x. And I would say that I have nothing in common, so I would not go any further. I would just leave it the way it is. If you did not want to have a leading coefficient that's negative, what you could do is you could instead put your cosines first. So I could have this cosine 5x squared and then minus 10x sine 7x sine 5x squared. Many times in textbooks you will see answers written that way so as to avoid having a leading negative coefficient. So that would be our final answer. Let's do one more that's a little bit more complicated, and then we'll have all good examples upon which to review. Okay, here's our last example, and we have a function, a sine function that's squared, and we have a product of two functions. We're going to use our product rule, and we're going to first rewrite it so that it's safe for us to work. So c is going to equal sine 2x, and that whole function is squared, and then times cosine 3x. Okay, let's use our rule. C prime equals left, so sine 2x whole thing squared. D right, that's going to be negative sine 3x times 3 plus right, so that's going to be cosine 3x. D left, which will be 2 sine 2x, now all that's to the first power, times the derivative of sine 2x, which is cosine 2x, times the derivative of 2x, which is 2. Okay, cleaning this up, c prime equals, let's bring the negative 3 in front, and then I have a sine 2x squared, and then I have a sine 3x, and then we're going to have plus, let's see, we have a 2 times a 2, that makes it 4, so I'm going to put, and then I'll bring it down here, I'm going to put a 4, and then I have cosine 3x, sine 2x, and then a cosine 2x, and there you go. So we had to use power rule, product rule, chain rule. So lots of good examples of how you can combine your rules together, and just be very systematic, and you'll always get this correct. So remember, your product rule is left d right plus right d left.